The neon lights of Lagos cast a ghostly glow over the rain-slicked streets. Outside the Agbala Club, where the wealthy came to forget their troubles, Dr. Ifeda Okafor sat in his Mercedes, watching a scene unfold that would change his life forever. A woman in a red dress stumbled onto the wet pavement. Even from a distance, he could see she was beautiful, the kind of beauty that made men forget their marriages and empty their bank accounts. But tonight, that beauty couldn't save her from being thrown out into the rain like yesterday's garbage. The club security guard didn't even look back as he slammed the door. The sound echoed through the night, mixing with distant thunder. Ifedi knew who she was. Everyone in Lagos did. Ola, they called her. The woman who could have been a queen, but chose to be a courtesan instead. Something stirred in Ifedi's chest as he watched her gather her torn purse from the ground. His mother had always told him that a person's true character shows in how they handle those society has cast aside. Tonight, that teaching would be put to the test. He could have driven past, like the other cars that splashed through puddles, their drivers pretending not to see. It would have been easier, safer. But 20 years of being a doctor had taught Ifedi that healing sometimes meant more than just fixing broken bodies. The rain grew heavier as he stepped out of his car. His Italian shoes, a gift from his last grateful patient, squelched in the mud. "Miss," he called out, holding his umbrella toward her. "Let me help you." Ola looked up, mascara running down her cheeks. In her eyes, Ifedi saw something that his medical degree hadn't prepared him for, a soul crying out for salvation. And in that moment, under the harsh neon lights and pouring rain, two lives that Lagos's polite society would never have allowed to intersect were about to become inextricably entwined. What happened next would spark gossip in every corner of Lagos, from the marble-floored banks to the local pepper soup joints. But neither Ifedi nor Ola knew that yet. For now, there was just the rain, the neon lights, and a simple act of kindness that would test the limits of love, forgiveness, and society's unwritten rules. People whispered about Dr. Ifeda Okafor in the hospital corridors. At 35, he was one of Lagos's most respected surgeons, the kind of doctor who remembered his patients' names and stayed late without complaining. Today, those same colleagues watched him treat the woman everyone knew as Ola, their eyes full of judgment and curiosity. Ifedi moved through the hospital ward with quiet confidence, his white coat crisp despite the humid air. In his pocket, he carried a small notebook where he wrote down his patients' stories, not just their symptoms, but their hopes and fears. The Ola's page remained blank. How could he write about someone who wore her pain like invisible armor? Ola, born Olayinka Adebayo, hadn't always been known by just one name. 25 years of life had stripped away everything except that single syllable and the reputation that came with it. As she lay in the hospital bed, her long braids spread across the white pillow, nurses noticed how she flinched at every sudden movement, a habit learned from years on Lagos's unforgiving streets. Their interactions revealed small moments that spoke volumes. When Ifedi brought her water, she held the cup with both hands, as if afraid it might be taken away. When he checked her wounds, she didn't turn away like she did with other doctors. And when he spoke to her, she listened with the intensity of someone who had grown used to hearing only lies. The other doctors saw a prostitute in a hospital bed. Ifedi saw layers. The way she corrected his English pronunciation when he was tired, how she folded her hospital blanket into perfect squares each morning, the quiet prayer she whispered before each meal. These weren't the habits of someone who had given up on life. They were the remnants of a different past, one that Lagos's rumor mill had long forgotten. In the staff room, Ifedi's colleagues tried to warn him. They knew about his troubles finding love, his broken engagement 2 years ago, the loneliness that followed him home each night. "She'll ruin you," his friend Dr. Bucci warned over coffee. Some people don't want to be saved, but what they didn't understand was that Ifedi wasn't trying to save anyone. In Ola's defiant dignity, in her careful words and cautious smiles, he recognized something that his years of medical training hadn't taught him, that sometimes the strongest hearts are the ones that have been broken and put themselves back together. As days passed in the hospital ward, other patients came and went, but something invisible was taking root. Neither Ifedi nor Ola could name it yet, but everyone around them could see it growing. A connection that defied Lagos's social rules. A story that would either end in triumph or tragedy. The evening at Ifedi's apartment started like any other boys' night. Beer bottles clinked against glass tables, and the aroma of peppered suya filled the air. But when Bachi started talking about Ola, the atmosphere shifted like Lagos weather before a storm. Remember that night at King's Club? Bachi laughed, not noticing how Ifedi's fingers tightened around his bottle. She was something else. Ask Chidi and Ahana. They know. The other men nodded, sharing knowing looks that made Ifedi's stomach turn. The revelations hit Ifedi like stones. His closest friends had all been with the woman he was falling for. Each story they shared carved deeper into his heart. But his face remained still, the way it did during difficult surgeries. Only the slight tremor in his hand betrayed his turmoil. Across town, in her small rented room, Ola sat before a cracked mirror, touching the fading bruises on her face. She didn't know about the conversation happening at Ifedi's place, but she felt its weight in her bones. Years of survival had given her a sixth sense for approaching storms. The next morning brought chaos to the hospital. Ola arrived with new bruises, her body telling stories her lips wouldn't speak. Ifedi found her in emergency room 3, curled into herself like a wounded animal. The sight of her broke something in him. Not just the doctor's professional concern, but something deeper, more personal. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice barely containing his rage. "Past customers," she whispered, her words heavy with shame and fear. "They said I stole from them. But I didn't, Ifedi. I swear I didn't." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Ifedi made his decision. Other doctors and nurses walked past, their whispers following like shadows. They all knew who Ola was. They all had opinions about what was happening between her and their respected colleague. Ifedi knelt beside her bed, ignoring the stares. His next words would change both their lives forever. "Marry me." The hospital seemed to hold its breath. A cleaner stopped mopping. A nurse dropped her clipboard, and somewhere in the distance, a monitor beeped steadily, counting heartbeats in the heavy silence. "You don't know what you're asking," Ola said, tears cutting clean tracks down her cheeks. "Your family, your friends, your reputation." "I know exactly what I'm asking," Ifedi replied, his voice carrying the same certainty he used when announcing a successful surgery. "I don't care about your past. I care about our future." News of the proposal spread through the hospital like wildfire, reaching Ifedi's family before the sun set. His sister Ogechi's voice on the phone crackled with fury. "Have you lost your mind? A doctor marrying a prostitute? What would Papa say?" But Ifedi had made his choice. In a city that thrived on appearances and social standing, he was choosing love over reputation, compassion over judgment. What he didn't know was that this choice would soon be tested in ways he couldn't imagine. That night, as Lagos's lights blinked on one by one, two people lay awake in different parts of the city. Ola, wondering if happiness could really be this simple, and Ifedi, unaware that his friends were already plotting to prove that some people never really change. Night had fallen over Lagos when Chidi gathered the men in his office. The leather chairs creaked as Bichi and Ahana settled in, their faces lit by the dim glow of expensive whiskey in crystal glasses. They were about to test a woman's loyalty with 5 million naira, enough money to buy dreams in this city. "It's for his own good," Chidi said, rolling the whiskey in his glass. "A doctor can't marry a prostitute. We're saving him from himself." But beneath his confident words lay something darker. Jealousy, perhaps, or the need to prove that people like Ola could never change. Meanwhile, Ogechi, Ifedi's sister, sat in her boutique after hours, her manicured nails tapping against her phone screen. She had spent years building her family's reputation in Lagos society. Now her brother threatened to destroy it all for love. As she dialed Chidi's number, she told herself this was mercy, not malice. The plan was simple. Offer Ola what she understood best: money for her body. 5 million naira. A fortune that could change lives in Lagos. They would prove to Ifedi that beneath Ola's reformed exterior beat the heart of a woman who could still be bought. Ola received the call while folding laundry in the apartment Ifedi had rented for her. Her hand stilled on one of his white doctor's coats as Chidi's voice slid through the phone like oil. 5 million. One night. Nobody needs to know. The old Ola would have named her price without hesitation. But this Ola felt different. She held Ifiti's coat closer, breathing in the faint scent of hospital antiseptic and his cologne. For the first time in her life, she had something money couldn't buy. Respect, love, a future. No, she said firmly, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. I'm not that person anymore. But temptation, like Lagos traffic, had a way of backing up. After she hung up, the number haunted her thoughts. 5 million naira. Enough to start a business. Enough to be independent. Enough to prove to Ifedi she could stand on her own. Her phone felt heavy in her hand as she typed. What's the hotel address? Across town, in his tastefully decorated office, Chidi smiled at the message. He looked at Buchi and Ahana, triumph gleaming in his eyes. Got her, he said, raising his glass. The streets always call their children home. None of them saw the tears falling on Ola's phone screen as she sent that message. None of them knew the war raging in her heart between the woman she was and the woman she wanted to be. And none of them, not even Ogechi with her careful plans, could predict how their test would shatter not just one love story, but many lives. In his hospital office, Ifedi was finishing his rounds, unaware that his world was about to crumble. He was thinking about ring sizes and wedding venues, while his friends were orchestrating his heartbreak with the precision of surgeons removing a tumor. Lagos traffic hummed outside, a constant reminder that in this city, nothing stayed still for long. Change was coming, carried on the wings of a text message, and 5 million naira worth of temptation. Here's Section 5, climactic sequence, written in simple English with emotional depth and third-person omniscient narration. The message glowed on Chidi's phone screen like an accusation. The room, filled with expensive furniture and the lingering scent of whiskey, fell silent as he held up his phone for everyone to see. Can you send me the hotel address? Ifedi felt the world tilt beneath his feet. The crystal glass in his hand slipped, shattering against the marble floor. Nobody moved to clean it up. The broken pieces caught the light, scattering it like the fragments of his heart. See? Chidi's voice cut through the silence. Once a prostitute, always a prostitute. But Ifedi wasn't listening anymore. He was already moving, his feet carrying him through Lagos's busy streets. The city lights blurred past as he drove home, his mind replaying every moment with Ola, searching for signs he might have missed. Had it all been a lie? The tears, the promises, the dreams they'd shared. He found their apartment dark and empty. The silence mocked him. On their bed lay one of his medical books that she'd been reading, trying to understand his world. A bookmark still held her place. She'd been learning about cardiac care, about healing hearts, while preparing to break his. When Ola finally came home, her face told a story different from what Ifedi expected. Her eyes were red, but clear. Her hands were steady, but her voice trembled as she spoke his name. Where were you? The words exploded from him, filled with all the pain and betrayal of the past hours. With Chidi. Was 5 million naira worth it? Ifedi, please, don't. He cut her off, his voice raw. I saw the message, Ola. You asked for the address. After everything, after all our plans. Tears streamed down Ola's face as she fell to her knees. I was tempted, she admitted, her words barely audible. The money, it could have given us a start. Oh, I couldn't do it. I turned back before I even got there. I swear, Ifedi, I couldn't betray what we have. But rage and hurt had deafened Ifedi to the truth in her voice. Years of medical training had taught him to look for symptoms, to diagnose problems. But in this moment, all he could see was the disease, not the cure. Get out, he whispered, then louder, get out. Ola rose slowly, dignity straightening her spine despite her tears. She looked at him one last time, memorizing his face. The man who had believed in her when no one else would, now transformed by anger and distrust. You're right, she said softly. I was a prostitute, but you were supposed to be different from them. You were supposed to believe in me. She walked out into the Lagos night, leaving behind the scent of her perfume and the echoes of shattered dreams. Outside, the city continued its chaotic dance of lights and sounds, indifferent to the tragedy unfolding within its concrete heart. In the empty apartment, Ifedi stood among the ruins of their life together, not yet knowing that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. His phone buzzed, Chidi calling to gloat, but he let it ring. In the silence that followed, he could hear his own words echoing back at him, and for the first time, he wondered if he had just destroyed the very thing he had been trying to protect. Days stretched into a blur at Ifedi's apartment. Empty coffee cups littered his desk, and patient files lay unopened. Then came the knock that would shatter his world again, this time with truth instead of lies. Ogechi stood in his doorway, her usual confidence replaced by something unfamiliar, shame. Her designer handbag hung limply at her side as she watched her brother's hollow eyes and unshaven face. "I have to tell you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "About Ola, about the test." The sun filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the room as Ogechi's confession spilled out. Each word fell like a stone into the silent room. "I planned it with Chidi," she admitted, unable to meet her brother's gaze. "The money, the test, all of it. I couldn't bear to see you marry someone like her." Her voice cracked. "But she never went to the hotel, Ifedi. She never met Chidi." Ifedi sat motionless, his doctor's hands gripping the armchair until his knuckles turned white. The truth rewrote everything he thought he knew, like a diagnosis proven wrong after the patient had already been treated. Chidi lied. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. He lied. We all lied. Ogechi's tears fell freely now. She asked for the address, yes. But do you know what she did? She went to the bank instead. To open an account. To start saving for your future together. The revelation hit Ifedi like a physical blow. He remembered her last words. "You were supposed to believe in me," and he hadn't. He had failed the test, not her. Outside his window, Lagos hummed with life, taxi horns, street vendors, the endless pulse of the city. But inside, time seemed to stop as Ifedi absorbed the weight of his sister's words. "Why?" he finally asked. "Why would you do this?" Ogechi sank into a chair, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. "Because I was wrong, Ifedi. So terribly wrong. I saw her past, but not her present. Not her fight to change. Not her love for you." The irony struck him then. He, who had promised to stand by Ola despite her past, had been the first to believe the worst when tested. While his family and friends had schemed to prove she couldn't change, they had instead proven how much she had. His medical degrees hung on the wall, mocking him. All that knowledge about healing bodies. But he had failed to heal the one heart that mattered most. "Where is she?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Ogechi shook her head. "Gone. Like smoke in the wind. Nobody knows where." The truth sat heavy in the room. His sister's confession had come too late. The woman who had fought so hard to change, who had turned down millions to stay true to her love, was gone. And he had driven her away not with rejection, but with something far worse, disbelief in her transformation. As evening fell over Lagos, brother and sister sat in the growing darkness, surrounded by the wreckage of good intentions gone wrong. Outside, the city's lights began to twinkle, each one a reminder of the countless stories of love and loss playing out beneath the African sky. Here's Section 7, Emotional Resolution, written in simple English with emotional depth and third-person omniscient narration. Time moved differently in Lagos after Ola disappeared. Ifedi searched everywhere. The old neighborhoods she once walked, the hospital corridors where they first fell in love, even the spot where he had found her that rainy night. But Lagos was a city of millions, and Ola had learned long ago how to vanish. In the hospital, he worked longer hours, took extra shifts, anything to keep his mind from wandering to her. His colleagues noticed the change. The way his smile never quite reached his eyes anymore. How he lingered with patients who had nowhere else to go. They saw a man trying to heal others because he couldn't heal himself. Months passed. Rainy season came and went. The city changed, as it always did, but some things remained constant, like the weight of regret Ifedi carried. Then one ordinary Tuesday, as he sorted through his mail, he found it. A plain white envelope with no return address. His hands trembled as he recognized her handwriting. Dear Ifedi, I forgive you. Not because you asked, but because holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I learned that from one of your medical books, the one I never finished reading. I won't tell you where I am. Don't look for me. Some stories aren't meant to have happy endings, but that doesn't make them any less important. You taught me that I could be more than my past. The irony is, you couldn't teach yourself the same lesson. But that's okay. We were chapters in each other's books, not the whole story. I'm building a new life now. Sometimes I think about that night in the rain, when you first stopped to help me. You were right. People can change. I did. Maybe one day, you will too. Take care of yourself, doctor. Oh, the letter slipped from his fingers, landing softly on his desk. Outside his office window, Lagos stretched endlessly, a maze of streets and lives and stories. Somewhere out there, Ola was starting over again. Without him. Because of him. In the following days, Ifedi changed too. He started a free clinic in the neighborhood where he first met Ola. Every Friday night, he treated those society had forgotten: sex workers, street children, the invisible people of Lagos. Not to find her, but to honor what she had taught him about second chances. His sister Ogechi joined him sometimes, her designer clothes replaced by simple scrubs as she helped register patients. Their shared guilt had transformed into something else, a mission to see people as they could be, not as they had been. Years would pass. Ifedi would continue his work, touching lives, healing bodies, and sometimes souls. He never married. How could he? His heart had learned its lesson in the hardest way possible, that love without trust is like medicine without healing. But sometimes, on rainy nights when the neon lights of Lagos blurred into watercolors, he would remember a woman in a red dress, standing proud despite her wounds. And he would smile, knowing that somewhere out there, Ola was proof that people could change, even if he had learned that truth too late.